From the very beginning, armor skills have been one of the most integral mechanics throughout the series. They're also one of the mechanics that has seen the most changes over time in how they're implemented and the design philosophy surrounding them. From minor utility skills to a major source of a hunter's overall power, armor skills have seen a broad range of use in the games. One often overlooked aspect of skills, though, is negative skills, where upon activation, instead of gaining an effect that makes you stronger or provides some kind of use to you, it instead reduces your effectiveness in some aspect, or makes something you do a little bit worse. These negative skills were an important part of how armor skills were designed for a very long time. And so today I'd like to talk about the history of negative skills, how they worked, and reasons for why they could be an improvement if they were brought back in a modern game. All the way back in Monster Hunter 1, armor skills were a significantly more obscure system. If you've played any pre-Gen 5 game, you're probably familiar with the skill point system, where once you reach a certain number of points in a skill, that skill will activate. In Monster Hunter 1, this system did not exist. In fact, you couldn't see what skills were on any of your armor pieces at all. In this game, skills worked more like hidden set bonuses, where once you've equipped certain combinations of armor, specific skills will be activated. In the absence of things like decorations and charms, this meant you were stuck with whatever skills, or lack thereof, that your armor activated. This included a number of negative skills. In this game, negative skills acted sort of like minor detriments that came with stronger positive skills, such as doubled poison duration or bad luck, like a kiss-curse system. As has been often cited on this channel, Monster Hunter 1 was largely inspired by the older online RPGs of its time. In these games, the concept of cursed items, or items that came with both positive and negative effects, were fairly common. So within the context of its time, it makes sense that this design was what they chose for Monster Hunter 1. As quickly as Monster Hunter G, the expansion for Mon Hun 1, the skill system already saw a major change. The addition of the skill point system that most people are familiar with started here. Along with many new skills being added, this also changed how negative skills worked. With the freedom given from being able to combine many different armor pieces to activate a skill, this also meant you had the freedom to try to avoid negative skill activations. With careful consideration, you could make mixed sets that would both activate the positive skills you wanted and avoided the activation of less desirable negative skills. With Monster Hunter 2, decorations were added, and this is where the style of set building that would become standard for most of the series was started. Decorations gave you an even greater amount of flexibility in how to build your sets for the skills you wanted. However, they also often came with their own set of negative skill points. This flexibility was counterbalanced by some skills being intrinsically linked to one another, such that it was difficult or even impossible to activate both skills at the same time, because gaining points in one would always lose you points in the other, when trying to slot in decos for them. The end result was that in many cases, you would get a set with 2 to 3 positive skills active, and possibly a negative skill activation to go along with it. Generally, the more positive skills you were trying to activate at once, the more likely you were to activate negative skills. Negative skills in the old games serve an interesting purpose. They essentially act as a way to obstruct the path toward optimizing your equipment, ensuring a level of complexity and a lack of straightforwardness, while also putting a limit on the amount of power you can obtain for free. This system offered 2 experiences: the meticulous number crunching for power users, carefully weighing your skill points to make the most optimized mix sets, and for casual players, you could simply equip whatever set and decos that had the skills you wanted, and deal with any negative consequences that came with it, maintaining that classic cursed item vibe. Monster Hunter World brought a large update to armor skills that made a single point activate the skill with additional points increasing its effectiveness. This also came with the removal of negative skills. It is well known that World, Rise, and Wilds has seen an explosion in player power due to these changes. It is easier than ever to equip yourself with all the damage skills you could want on one set, leading to various levels of homogenization in set building and power creep. Wilds seemingly did attempt to address this by splitting skills between armor and weapons, which could have in theory put limits on what and how many skills you can have active at any time. However, in practice, player power has ended up right at the same spot it did in the past couple games. And I do believe this is something worth addressing. I think set building was more interesting in the past games, and keeping player power in check in comparison to the content not only makes the content itself easier to balance and feel good in terms of difficulty and pacing, but also makes every skill feel more impactful. Having to choose between getting sharpness or weakness exploit is a lot more compelling than just being able to get both for no real cost. Balancing between skills notwithstanding, of course. There's always going to be metas and people who go online to look up what the meta sets are and not interact with the system as a whole. However, I don't think there's much merit in designing around that. Some would say that the real way to fix this is to just return to the skill point system. Inherently, you just had a lot less space on a set to activate skills with, which would limit your power in that way. I don't think that's actually necessary, though. I think the modern skill system is perfectly usable with some tweaks. One thing to consider when talking about reintroducing negative skills alongside the modern system is that it would be easy to make it too punishing. If you just slapped negative activations onto every armor piece, you would get bogged down by tons of debuffs, which wouldn't be fun and wouldn't maintain the same purpose as the original negative skill system. I think one way to avoid this would be to tie negative skill activations to specific levels of positive skill activation. Like, if you were to max out weakness exploit, it would also activate a negative attack boost skill, for example. This would be a somewhat harsh and gamified way to implement negative skills. In this way, it would be impossible to truly offset the negative skills because they would just be debuffs you would have that would come attached to positive skill activations. You could play around it by avoiding activating a positive skill at the level that activates the negative skill as well. So in the previous example, only activating weakness exploit 4 instead of going to 5. Another way you could go about it would be to mimic the classic system within the modern one, but only for negative skills. So, for example, to activate a negative critical eye skill, you would need to have 3 negative points in it on your set. This could be a very binary on or off type skill. Once you meet the threshold, you get negative 25% affinity, or whatever. With this, you could slap 1 or 2 negative skill points on most pieces of armor, and equipping a full set would surely activate at least 1. This would simulate the old style of negative skill activations and allow a similar type of counterplay. This would also mesh well with decos, allowing them to once again have some negative skill points attached to them. Throughout this discussion, there is one aspect I've glossed over thus far, that being charms and talismans. Even going back to the old games, charms didn't mesh with negative skills very well. They were very powerful for their single slot, being able to have many positive skill points on them to help you activate whatever skills you wanted. But due to their randomized nature, negative skill points on them were essentially inconsequential. They were even a very easy way to avoid any negative activations on your set if you just slapped one on with 1 or 2 points of that skill. In the modern games, much of this remains true, and in fact I would say they are even stronger than they used to be. The power budget attached to them has only gone up over time. In the realm of adding negative skills to the modern system, I think charms could be balanced by attaching a negative skill activation to every charm by default, but perhaps that would be too punishing. Maybe it would even discourage people from equipping a charm in some cases. I think charms really make balancing negative skills and maintaining their integrity and purpose pretty hard. Truthfully, I would be in favor of removing charms altogether, negative skills or not. I don't think they've ever really made the games better, but that's a topic for another video perhaps. Some might be hearing this and thinking, but I don't want negative skills back, I like what we have now. And honestly, that's fair. There is a certain allure in the power fantasy of stacking many positive skills together to eliminate weaknesses and become strong. It's also elegant in its simplicity. Not all change is necessarily positive or negative. Monster Hunter has changed a lot in recent years, and I think it's always worth looking back at things that have been left behind and seeing if any of it could be brought back as an improvement to the modern gameplay. I think negative skills brought a fun level of friction and flavor to the game, but in terms of dealing with player power creep, it's also not the only way it could be handled. They could simply reduce how many skills are on armor, or change how they're activated. Perhaps they could create a new system that only lets you activate a hard limit of skills at one time, regardless of how many you actually have on your set, and you have to select which ones you want. I am, of course, only pushing my own agenda of bringing back negative skills by attaching it to an existing problem and offering it as a solution, which I do genuinely think would work. I think they could be a fairly elegant counterbalance to the great amount of power that has been thrown onto armor in recent games. Negative skills have a long and storied history, and the armor skill system in general has seen much iteration over the years. There's many pros and cons for every version of these mechanics. What is your take on negative skills? Do you think they should be brought back? Is power creep even an issue worth solving? Let me know in the comments. That's all from me for now. See ya.